The relative calm that is the new post-9/11 normal has been shattered by Friday's terror attacks in Paris. Right now, France is in its third and final day of national mourning, and the police are looking for more suspects. The coordinated attacks left scores dead at 6 sites across the city, including the National Stadium, a crowded concert hall, and several restaurants. Investigators believe 3 well-organized teams of assailants carried out the attacks with automatic weapons and explosive devices. And the Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the attack and is now threatening the United States. French President Hollande called those attacks an act of war. And in response, French jets pounded the ISIS stronghold of Raqqa in Syria. But with the Syrian refugee crisis swelling Europe's borders and testing its economies and patience, and with confirmation that one of the murderers entered Europe seeking humanitarian aid, what does all this say about ISIS and its campaign of terror? Joining us now with expert analysis and insight is Ambassador R. James Woolsey, former director of the CIA, chancellor of the Institute of World Politics, and chairman of the Leadership Council Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Ambassador, welcome.
Good to be with you.
Now, Ambassador, with all that has happened over the weekend, do you believe that November 13th has the possibility of transforming the West's war on terror as September 11th did?
Only if we're ready to be transformed. And some national leadership, like President Hollande, seem ready. Others, like ours, do not. And I think that it should transform things because it's quite clear that we are at war with ISIS, or rather they are at war with us. We haven't decided yet.
Well, let's unpack that. Over the weekend, Congressman Mac Thornberry, he's the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, said that the intelligence services in this country have been forced to fight terrorism with their hands tied behind their backs. Do you think that's an accurate statement?
Yes, I think Snowden has a lot of blood on his hands from Paris last Friday. The concerted effort to cut down on the effectiveness of our ability to intercept communications and the like, even though nothing really has changed except the numbers of intercepts, but not the degree of intrusiveness. That was changed, I think, in a very negative way here some months back, and I think we're having a harder time now and will have a harder time in the future as a result of those so-called reforms.
Are you talking about the reforms that came about after Edward Snowden revealed some of the surveillance activities of the NSA?
Yes, and he revealed not just some, a very great deal. I debated his lawyer at one point in New York, and they don't have an answer to the fact that they turned loose lots of material on, for example, how Mexican and American intelligence services and law enforcement are working together to stop human trafficking. I'm not sure why Mr. Snowden thought he should disclose the way we try to cut down on human trafficking. Maybe he wanted to help the pimps. I don't know.
Well, Ambassador, as you know, you don't have to. Many people who are not necessarily supporters of Mr. Snowden believe that far from our intelligence services being too restricted, they are not restricted enough. Even one presidential candidate in the Republican field believes that. Do we have to become a surveillance state in order to fight terrorism adequately?
No, but we have to recognize when we do have a lot of oversight. I was general counsel of the Senate Armed Services Committee in the early 70s and had responsibility as a congressional staffer for overseeing oversight, essentially, of the CIA and intelligence. And there were no institutions other than our committee, a small share of our committee that was devoted to that. But now we have a special court that is devoted to it. We have 2 major congressional committees and appropriations committees that deal with intelligence. We have a lot. We are the most controlled and overseen intelligence service in the world by the people's representatives. And people who don't believe that just don't know the facts.
Well, sir, as I mentioned in the introduction, it's now been confirmed that one of the attackers came into the country of France as part of one of the waves of Syrian refugees. How should that affect the policies of the European countries and the United States policy regarding Syrian refugees?
Well, whether it's the Syrians or some other group coming out of the chaotic, increasingly chaotic Middle East or elsewhere, one wants to have a very thorough vetting, I would say, especially of young men, before letting them in. And our system doesn't really work effectively to do that. Part of the problem is that for a number of these countries, including, as I understand it, Syria, passports are very easy to forge. They're very easy to obtain. And we have a great deal of difficulty doing the vetting. It's not impossible. And I think one should be alert, particularly to the situation with women and children fleeing all sorts of horrors that chase them in that part of the world. But it doesn't mean that you just open the gates and let people through. That way lies
nobody's suggesting
ISIS
that.
Well, it depends on how much. It's a question of degree. Are you going to let all 10,000 through within days, or are you going to let 1,000 through without vetting them? I don't know. You've got to look at it case by case.
You know, President Obama's Deputy National Security Advisor, Ben Rhodes, said yesterday that the vetting process is there and is working, and the Syrian refugees have already started coming into this country. How do you respond to that?
Well, a lot of people would disagree with Mr. Rhodes on that point and don't think that an effective vetting job is being done at all, that they don't have the material to do it because they don't have information about where people are from and documents that haven't been forged and the rest. This is not straightforward. Just because we want it to be the case and are going through the motions doesn't mean we're doing anything useful.
Now, Ambassador, today, ISIS issued a video, let out a video where they threatened to attack Washington, D.C. and all the countries that are engaged in attacking them in their so-called caliphate. Should we take that serious? I mean, there are no known credible threats that they are attacking us right now, or that they're about to attack us right now.
We used to say in the intelligence business that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The fact that we don't know something doesn't mean it's not going to happen. The threat is probably made consciously to go after Washington, D.C., and they probably regard it as a very substantial step that would give them a great deal of attention if they succeed. So if I had to bet, and it's based on nothing more than a hunch, I would say yes, they'll come after Washington.
And finally, Ambassador, what is the one thing you fear the most, the one threat that you think is the most likely or the most deadly?
Well, it wouldn't be yet from ISIS. It would be from a state that had a nuclear weapon, such as I'm afraid Iran will in relatively short order, and North Korea does already. But launching that into orbit with a simple booster device like a Scud, and detonating it over the United States could destroy the American electric grid. And if you destroy the electric grid, you are not pushed back into the 1980s pre-web, you're pushed back into the 1880s pre-electricity, and very few of us have enough plow, horses, and seeds to live a 19th century agricultural existence.
All right, Ambassador. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you.